Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Ocean Career Series event. My name is Danielle Carter, use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Youth Engagement Coordinator here at the Seattle Aquarium. The Seattle Aquarium is located on the shores of Puget Sound in the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. But tonight, we are 100% virtual. We appreciate the opportunity to welcome you from wherever you call home, and we hope that you all are staying safe and healthy. So if you've joined us in the past for one of our Ocean Career Series events, you've known that we've had multiple panelists. But so many of you have expressed interest in learning more about the veterinary field. So tonight, I'm really excited to introduce you to the Seattle Aquarium's veterinarian, Dr. Caitlin Hadfield. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Danielle. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Now, can we just start off and can you share a little bit about how you got to the aquarium, kind of what your path was?
Sure. I'll start with the fact that I'm British. So I kind of grew up all over. And when university choices came up, I wasn't actually sure I wanted to do this. So I actually did zoology and had a lot of fun. And through that, realized that there are aspects of veterinary medicine of aquatic species that I really love. And so I applied to vet school. I got in, I think because they were like, I don't know how this is going to work out. We'll give it a go. Specifically because I wanted to do fish medicine and aquatic animals. And then from vet school, I explored as many opportunities as I could. I came out of that with an internship and then effectively kind of got promoted from there at National Aquarium in Baltimore, which is a big facility on the East Coast. And I was there for a year was the plan. I was there in the end for more than 10. And then I was looking around for something a little bit different. This job came up in Seattle Aquarium and I moved over here in 2017.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. Now, I know we kind of just jumped right into that. Can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a veterinarian? I think a lot of people have an idea because they may take their dog or cat to a vet, but you're a vet at an aquarium. So what is a veterinarian? What do you do?
That's a surprisingly difficult question to answer because vets take on so many different roles in different positions. I would say, having worked with a lot of students coming out of school, the assumption is that vets are primarily dog and cat vets doing private practice of pets. And they're predominantly working to sort of save animals all day, every day. And the reality of our jobs, I would say, is that it is mostly about communication with people and helping to manage animals as best as we can as part of that. And the reason that's a very vague answer is that there's an enormous diversity of options with a veterinary degree that you can go into. It's not all dog and cat medicine. And so I came into this knowing that I didn't want to do dog and cat medicine. I wanted to do aquatic animal medicine because of the engineering and the chemistry and the stuff that we don't know. And so my approach to this is different, I would say, than others.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And I just want to remind everybody who's joining us tonight, if at any point during the night you have questions, we're going to have a lot of time devoted to answering your questions. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box. And if you just click on that, that's a great place to put your questions and we'll be able to answer them for you. And if you have any questions now about what is a vet and what Dr. Caitlin does here at the aquarium, go ahead and put those into the chat box. So what got you interested in wanting to be a fish doctor, essentially? Because you said you knew you didn't want to do dog and cat medicine.
Yeah, I came at this very much from loving coastal areas and tide pooling and all those aspects of things. And when after my zoology degree, I did 2 years of animal behavior work, which was very interesting, and it was a great opportunity. But during that, I got to see vets working with marine mammals, and it was so engaging to me. It was so interesting to me because you had to understand so much of the evolutionary biology and the natural history and water chemistry and engineering and life support systems, and put all that together, working with a team to come up with the best option for an animal. That was the first time that veterinary medicine really grabbed me. Because before that, I had seen veterinary medicine as people in lab coats looking after dogs and cats in practices. And I saw people when I was 15, 16, 17, and that's what they wanted to do. And that was amazing. I wasn't that focused. I wasn't that driven towards that. And when I saw this aspect of veterinary medicine, I realized that there's so much more to it, but that really engaged me, that constant learning, those opportunities to develop with a program was really appealing to me.
Very cool. We have some questions coming in. This one seems pretty relevant to what we were talking about. How do you get the marine mammals to participate in their own care?
That is a great question. And the short answer is we use training. So we use positive reinforcement training. So food and other things that the animals find really reinforcing that's going to make a behavior more likely. We build up a relationship with those animals. We use those positive reinforcements to effectively develop behaviors that we can then use to provide the medical care. And the first step in that is building that relationship, is identifying what an animal finds positive, also identifying their communication cues, because this is very much a two-way street with training. It's not a one-way thing. And then from there, you tend to start with the very basics, which might be sort of a target, or similar for a dog. The very first one is usually a sit and focus on me. And then from there, you can sort of build up that behavior repertoire and develop these behaviors. And our goal at the Seattle Aquarium, and for most aquariums, is to do everything that we can with the animals' cooperation. We don't want to have to catch animals. We don't want to have to sedate animals if we don't need to. And so we work very hard with our awesome animal care staff and to develop things like being able to ultrasound our animals with their cooperation, being able to take blood samples, being able to do x-rays, being able to give vaccines, that sort of thing. And that just takes all the stress out of those procedures. And it really is just the most amazing opportunity. And I'm going to do a shout out for the staff here, because it's a huge focus of the teams here. And it's really wonderful to work with them on that.
Now, do you participate in any of that cooperative care training, or would you attribute most of that to the bird and mammal team?
No, I do, and we've got 2 relief vets, and we've got a veterinary technician, and actually that's very important. These animals are smart, they know who they're working with. And so if, let's say, they're working on being able to take a blood sample, and they work always with the trainer that they're very closely associated with, if someone else comes in, they're like, this is a different situation. So it's really important that we work together with that. And it's also really important during those training sessions that the communication from the animal and between the 2 people, or sometimes 3 people who are working with the animal, is spot on, because we want to keep this all as positive as possible. And we want it to be effectively a nothing behavior where the animal's like, great, I do this. This is great. I'm very happy about this. That's where we want this to be.
Now, we had a question. Somebody wanted to know if you get to name the animals.
Oh, there's so much behind that. In terms of who gets to name animals, that varies depending on the place. Animals, obviously, typically, if they're born under human care, are given names very young. And that might be by the people who are looking after them. Sometimes it's sort of offered up to the public around to see what a favorite name is, that sort of thing. In terms of why we name animals, it makes it much easier. But having said that, every one of our animals has a code. So something very sweet and very empathic, like M14001, that's not very practical on a day-to-day basis. But everything, our lump suckers, our lobsters, everything has ID numbers so that we can identify them. And there is a tiny bit of superstition in our industry that if we name an animal, something terrible is going to happen within a day or 2. And so that's why you'll find animal care people being like, really, we've got to name the octopus right now? Okay. So there's a little hesitation on that front. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that'll, yeah, the question was just, do you get to name them? So I think that that answers it. Um, let's see. Where was our next question? Oh, someone wanted to know, you talked about your path and how it was a little bit different than what most people would think of when they think of a vet for, small animals, dogs and cats. And someone wants to know, what degree programs did you follow? And if there's any place or program that you would recommend studying with.
Good question. And my training happened mostly in the UK, in England. So it's a little bit different. So I'm going to flip that a little bit and say what the typical training is in the US. And I'm going to give the answer that every single vet student and qualified vet who's come and worked with me has said. And then I'm going to explain how that's actually not what most people do. So the standard training to get into any sort of zoological medicine, so that might be working in a zoo, it might be working at wildlife rehab, it might be working in an aquarium, is in the US, you do an undergraduate degree that is usually in a science-based subject, or at least a science within it. And then from there, you do a veterinary degree. And from there, most people say, this is going to sound like a lot, I'm going to say that right now, that they're going to do a small, what's called a small animal rotating internship. And that means going to work for a big practice that sees a lot of cases, and they have specialists in ophthalmology, so eye stuff, they have specialists in internal medicine and in surgery, and the intern rotates around and gets a really good base, because most vet schools are not going to let you do a ton of things you're going to be learning. And then from that internship, most people say they're going to do another internship, so another year-long training program with a zoo or aquarium. And that's taking that basis, all the learning that you've done on domestic species, dogs, cats, horses, sheep, everything else, and then working on zoo and aquarium species, so non-domestic species. And then everyone says that they're then going to get a residency, which is 3 more years of training. And that's a very regulated program. And then they all say they're going to get a job and they're going to do boards after that. And boards is sort of the specialist certification. So if you're going to go and get a good knee surgery, you're probably going to go to a boarded surgeon who's good at that. So that's what every person I've ever spoken to said they're going to do. And in reality, that is obviously an enormous amount of training. That is an enormous amount of traveling that not everyone can do. And then as you go through those programs, there's fewer and fewer of those available. And so I see students who are very focused on, this is a path, this is what I'm going to do, and they get very, very upset when they can't follow that path. So in terms of trying to reassure people, I would say at least half of the vets in zoological institutions or non-domestic species have gone into this from a different route. They've done the veterinary degree, have to do that, and they've often done some training, but they've either been a really good fit or been in a great location or sought out an opportunity that really worked out, and have gone into the field straight from there. So that, I would say, is the more typical route. That's effectively what I did. And so I did boards through that route and did everything else, and I've loved my career path, but I didn't take that traditional route that everyone says they're going to do.
Right. And this question is kind of related to that. As you talked about going through vet school, doing the different internships to learn about specialties, animals, different things. But there was a question, and it says, dogs and cats have a large body of research that you can reference for diagnosis and treatment if need be. So where do you get that information for the diverse group of marine animals that your staff work with? And is there any research involved with that?
That is such a good question. There is information available, but it is very limited, and we often extrapolate a lot. And for fish in particular, most of the research has, for understandable reasons, focused on the species that we culture for food or for research. That's really where those species are. So we know a ton about salmon, we know a ton about koi carp, we know a ton about zebrafish. But all of us in this industry, as well as our sort of normal jobs, we also share that information as much as we can, because we're in this because we find it interesting, and we're all experiencing different aspects of this field. And so there is a lot of research going on, and there's a lot of trying to build that evidence-based medicine rather than anecdotal medicine. That's where we're trying to get to. So there are textbooks now. I can do a random shout out for the one that I wrote, Clinical Guide to Fish Medicine, if you would like to buy a textbook on fish, that's there. But there's others out there, and there is increasing support across the industry for these non-domestic species. I would say 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you were flying pretty blind on birds and reptiles and fish. And there's just increasing information now and increasing expertise going into these species, which is great because we want to provide them with the same level of care that dogs and cats get.
All right. We have another, thanks for answering that one. We have another one that kind of relates to this. And someone wants to know, you touched on this a little bit, but have you worked anywhere else besides the Seattle Aquarium? I think you said the National Aquarium, right?
Yep, so my path is unusual. If you ask most zoo or aquarium vets that, they're going to list out 5 or 6 or 7 places that they've worked. It is quite common for us to shift around. And so that is one area where this industry in terms of equity just isn't hitting the mark of where we want to be because we're requiring people to move around. In my case, I've actually worked as a vet student or as a biologist, I've worked at other places. But since I qualified as a vet, I have worked at National Aquarium in Baltimore and Seattle Aquarium. And then I've consulted and covered at a bunch of other aquariums in those areas and helped with procedures and things. And so that was being able to stay at one place was a really nice opportunity. I had a phenomenal boss at National Aquarium, which is very, very important. And it allowed me to really grow my skills and develop into the kind of vet that I want to be, which is really important when you come out of any degree. And then from there, I sort of hit that point at National Aquarium where we'd done everything before. And so we had sloths. If a sloth got into trouble, we're like, oh, yep, I know what that is. We'll do that. Yep, good to go. I can do that in my sleep. And so I wanted something a little bit different, which is why I moved over to Seattle.
So besides the fact that we don't have any sloths at the Seattle Aquarium, what do you find similar and different, comparing your job here at the Seattle Aquarium to when you worked at National Aquarium?
Okay, first off, sloth babies are quite adorable. They're not as adorable as sea otter pups, but they're adorable. There's a lot of differences. I knew at that stage of my career, and it took a while to realize that I was looking for a smaller institution, smaller teams. And I love at the Seattle Aquarium the focus that we have on local species in basically 2 ecosystems is what we're focusing on. Whereas I would say most of these aquariums that I know have habitats that exemplify lots of different places all around the world. And I really have always loved the institutions that focus on their local species and promoting them to the people who come to visit. And so that was a big draw. And then when I did visit, it was very clear to me, I'd been looking for a job for a little while. The atmosphere here and how people felt about their jobs was different and it was special. And that has been confirmed since I've worked here, which is good. But I trusted that instinct and it worked out.
Awesome. One more question, and then we'll move on to our next section, not our last section. You talked about it, but if you could just sum up about, on average, how many years of schooling to get into the zoo, aquarium, veterinary field?
Good question. If you're talking about from high school, so going into college, the minimum would probably in the Europe be 6 years, would be the minimum of a veterinary degree and probably a training program. The sort of the maximum that I hear about, which is going to freak people out a little bit, but I want to be honest about it, is 11 or 12 years, which is a long time. And that sort of brings up the point that I have seen people who want to get into this job because of the final job. And that is a very frustrating place to be. Whereas the people I've seen who enjoy the process, so they enjoy the learning, they enjoy working somewhere new, meeting new places, discovering new areas, that sort of thing, they've really enjoyed that process, even if they've had a lot of training time. Whereas the folks are like, my only goal is this, they can be very frustrated with that long path and the fact that no outcome is guaranteed for any of us.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. So we'll get into kind of our next section. which is, what does your day look like? Now, I mean, our offices are pretty close to each other at the aquarium, and I know I don't see you at your desk every day. I hear your name on the radio a lot. So do you have a typical day?
The short answer to that is no. Every day does vary, and that sounds very cliched, but it really does. My day typically consists of, we try and where we can, animal things tend to be earlier in the day if we've got them. There might be days where I don't put hands on an animal at all, but that might be that we're going to do some preventative medicine exams on a river otter or a wolf eel, and then we've got 2 rockfish who are sick to check out. And that would be, for me, a very busy clinical day, a very busy clinical day. And then that is what people think vets do all the time. There is so much around that to make that happen, that most of my job is building our capacity to be able to meet the animal's needs. So a lot of my job is spent sitting at my desk. A lot of my job is spent talking to other people and coming up with the best possible plans that we can in the situation that we have. And a lot of my job is spent writing things up. And when people ask to shadow me, I'm like, well, it's going to be really dull sitting next to me at my computer, but okay. But I do think people need a realistic idea of what, if they're getting into or they're interested in careers, what that really looks like. One thing I would say is that while you're training, you're likely to be doing more animal stuff. And especially in that like busy first internship, you will probably be doing animal stuff all day long and wondering how on earth you write all the records about all those animals. But as you sort of progress, that job changes and you start managing more of the program, more of how to prevent issues in the animals, rather than, okay, I'm the one they call when they find a frog with a prolapse, that sort of thing.
Now, you said you don't necessarily, put hands on animals all day, every day, right? But what are some of like your favorite and least animals to work with when you get to work with them?
For me, that varies depending on a lot of factors. In terms of the species out here that I've been really interested to learn about, Pacific spiny lumpsuckers, possibly the cutest fish in the ocean. They've been great. The grunt sculpins, very interesting to work with. I haven't worked as much with flatfish before until I got out here. And I hadn't worked directly with sea otters before. I'd done river otters and Asian small-clawed otters and that sort of thing. And then the fur seals also were a new one for me. So learning those new species is always really interesting because there's so many differences. So I came into this thinking that a northern fur seal was probably pretty similar to California sea lions. They kind of live together. Absolutely, completely different in every possible way. And so for me, it's that learning new things is interesting. So if I have a really interesting case, that I find that very interesting in terms of like engaging.
I don't know if you can answer this from the top of your head, but what do you think one of the smallest animals is that you get to work with at the Seattle Aquarium?
We take care of everything. We take care of fish larvae and all the way up. I would say the funniest small animal surgery I did was this is actually a National Aquarium, it's a little tree frog. And if you can picture a red-eyed tree frog, they're the ones you see in all the pictures. They have stripes along their side of their body. Well, this particular tree frog, about yay big, had a hernia. And so we anesthetized it, we gave it pain relief, and we did surgery, and I repaired the body wall, and I stitched it back together, and the stripes didn't match. So for the next, I don't know how many years at the National Aquarium, there's this tree frog and the stripes didn't match. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I should have made the stripes match. So yeah, but the frog did fine.
That's good. And I'm sure the frog didn't mind that its stripes didn't match. Let's see. What's the largest animal you've ever worked with?
I was very honored several times to be called up to Maryland Zoo to help with their elephants. And that's certainly the largest animal that I've been in free contact with. And they are beautiful, majestic, very well cared for, spectacular animals, it has to be said.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about working with all of the different, talked about the lump suckers and the grunt sculpins. So is there different equipment that you use when you're working with some of these fish?
For the most part, we use equipment that would look fairly familiar certainly to dog and cat vets, but also to the human medicine field. We use a lot of the same equipment, we just modify it. There's some things, because in our industry, we tend to work with smaller animals. You don't get dogs that are this big. So we tend to have more in the way of magnification and instruments that help with that. But other than that, there might be some things where, sorry about the noise in the background, I can't make it be quiet. And the screen pop-ups, sorry. There are some things that might look unusual. So things like we work with powdered drugs a lot. So we have fume hoods to work with that. We have anesthesia carts for fish. They might look a little bit different, but most of the other stuff we use is really taken from dog and cat medicine and modified for our use.
So how do you give medicine to the animals? I know if I have to give my dog medication, I can usually just hide it in her food, and most of the time she won't find it. Is it the same with the aquarium animals?
Largely it is. I would say even as a vet student, I always felt so bad when I gave an owner a medicine to give to their cat. They're like, just hold the cat and give the medicine, it'll be fine. Dead easy. So I've always felt bad about that. So again, this is where knowing the species is so important. So giving medicine to a fur seal is as easy as possible if it's oral. They eat enormous prey items. You give those same medicines to a sea otter, and they are a very suspicious species, and they like to chew and they like to find things that they don't trust, and then they're out of there. And then the weirdest one I've seen is same thing, putting medications into fish. I've worked with big stingrays before, and I didn't know this was possible. So stingrays have, they're living on the bottom, their mouth is on the bottom, and then at the top side, they have these two holes called spiracles, which is where when they breathe in, some of the water can transfer through the spiracles if they're buried in the sand. And I was diving and checking out an animal, and we gave it herring, and it had, I think, 6 pills in it, and fed this herring to this big stingray and watched out of the spiracles, pop 1 pill, pop 2nd pill, pop 3rd pill, pop 4. I was like, how is that possible? I had no idea that was even possible. So there are tricks for each of the species to try and get oral meds in as best as we can. And then if we have to, we might do topical medications, which is medication on the skin or on the mouth or something like that. We might give injectable medications. And again, going back to that first question on using training, we want to do that all with their cooperation. So we want the animal to just be like, yep, I'll sit here and I'll eat my favorite foods and I'll get my medication and off we go. But again, it comes back to knowing the species, knowing how to get there, where we can give the medications, what we can give. So there's a lot around that decision that we don't take lightly when we start giving medications.
Right. And you mentioned a few minutes ago how you will do rounds and check in on the different animals. What do the regular checkups look for like some of the mammals, like the seals or otters, compared to the birds, compared to the fish or invertebrates? Are they similar or different?
They are different because as an industry, we sort of switched from many years ago where it was just watch the animals. And then we sort of transitioned to this sort of stage where every animal should get anesthetized every year so that we can check it out. And where we are now, which is, I think, a much better place, is we do everything based on effectively a risk analysis or a cost benefits. So if we're doing exams on birds, we know elderly birds, especially elderly seabirds, might be prone to these diseases. So we're going to develop a program where they get looked at a lot so we can look for those diseases. But a young harbor seal has a very different situation. So we're going to target their preventative medicine program to what that individual in that species tends to need. And so what this means is that we've got a veterinary program of care that is very specific to our animals and meeting what they need without putting too much risk on them. And that balance, again, it takes that training, it takes that experience to get there. And that's what I like now about the stage of my career, is I can build this program, I can build the staff capacity to do this and really meet what the animals need, rather than having any kind of rigid rules about, hey, you know what, every 3 months we catch up this sea otter. I was like, I don't think we should be there.
Right. So it seems like you really need to be able to know the individual animals well in order to notice illnesses and when you might need some intervention. How do you grow those relationships with the animals to be able to do that?
Yeah, that's a good one. And the shortest answer to that is I rely on an amazing animal care team to notice the subtle differences. Because just like with your budgie at home, if a vet doesn't see the bird until that bird is fluffed and just sitting on a perch and looking really bad, it's very sick. And so what you want, especially with these non-domestic species that they're likely to hide illness for a while, is you want to catch the really subtle things. And our staff are amazing at catching the most subtle things that I could ever imagine. Like it's blinking its left eye a little bit more than it normally does. It's like, wow, okay, gotta check it out. And so it is relying on that relationship there. And across the board, whether it's you taking care of your backyard chickens, or it's dog and cat, it's that knowing that animal and what's normal for that animal and what might be abnormal for that animal lets you address any concerns much earlier, which is huge.
Definitely. I'll do one more question for this section. But since you talked a lot about observing the animals, kind of knowing what their day-to-day is, are you involved with any behavioral or medical research at the aquarium?
Yeah. There's a very long answer to that, but I'm going to give you a short one, which is that there is a lot of research there are a lot of research projects going on, and I am either directly involved or peripherally involved in them. Anything that impacts the animals, I am involved in making sure that there's no risks to the animals. And then there's some specific projects that I'm leading. So there is a lot going on. I would say for this program, given all the growth of the aquarium over the next few years with Ocean Pavilion coming on board, I don't have a ton of free time to develop a big research program that centers on me. So I'm much more, there's some small programs and I'm supporting other programs because we're really focusing on the animals right now.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I do want to get to something exciting that's happened at the aquarium recently. We recently opened a new vet clinic, which I'm sure makes your job a lot easier. And you had a chance to tour one of our Youth Ocean Advocate high school volunteers around that space, right?
Yep, I did.
All right, I think we have a video of that. I know we have a video of that.
Hi, I'm Gabby, here with our Youth Ocean Advocate, our high school volunteer program, and I'm so excited that we'll be meeting our aquarium vet. So let's go meet her. Hi, I'm Gabby, and I'm so excited to be here today because I wanted to be a vet ever since I can remember.
That's really exciting to hear. We're very excited to have you here, Gabby. It's nice to meet you. And I'm Caitlin Hadfield. I'm the senior veterinarian at the Seattle Aquarium.
It's so nice to meet you. I've been watching the constructions here for over the past few months, and I'm so excited that it's finally open.
We are too. This has given us so many opportunities that we didn't have before. So it's really exciting to have this space available to us now.
Yeah, and the first thing that caught my attention is this table that's right in the middle.
Yep, so this is called a wet table. This is a piece of equipment that we didn't have access to before, and it's really helpful when you're dealing with aquatic animals. So things like fish, our seabirds, and our sea otters. This table lets us work with water in a way that we didn't used to be able to do before.
That's so cool. And another thing that is very interesting, I think, are those pipes that are over there.
Yes, we're excited about those as well. Because we work with fish and sea turtles and things like that in here, we want to have easy access to the water that they rely on. So we've actually plumbed in our salt water and our fresh water so that if we need to change out water for the animals, we can do that really easily. And they put in really, really big pipes so it comes out extremely fast.
Wow, that's great. So this is a familiar thing to me. I noticed that this is an ultrasound machine.
Yep, it is an ultrasound machine. It's a good eye, and we use this all the time. It's actually really useful for our aquatic species, and we use it in everything here. We've also used it quite a bit in our octopus, which is really fun.
And there's an image on the screen. Do you know what that is?
Yep, I pulled up an image of a fish, and we're looking at a fish belly. Ultrasound works really well in water. And so the fish is actually underwater right there, and we've got the ultrasound probe near it, and it's looking at her belly, and she's got some immature eggs in there. And so this is something that we can monitor over time and make sure that the eggs that she's got in here are growing normally and that she lays them as we expect her to.
Wow, that is truly amazing.
Yeah, it's a very, very cool piece of equipment.
Yeah, and another thing that's pretty exciting is the window that we have here.
We're very excited about that. This came up pretty early in the design plans because we wanted to share what we do for animal care, both with our visitors, but also even with our staff and volunteers. We've never been able to do that before because we've been very space limited. And so this gives us opportunities we've never had, and we're excited to learn how to use this as best as possible to really showcase what we do here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being outside the window and watching all the action that's going down in here. I have committed to UW Seattle, and do you have any advice for anyone who will be starting college soon and hopefully starting the process of becoming a vet?
My advice would be in general that it seemed like when I was your age that there was really one path, and that you kind of had to follow this path or something was going wrong, and I don't think that's ever true. So I think that's the biggest one. I think it's really good to have goals. I think it's really good to enjoy the process. So the veterinary degree in particular is a lot of work, and it's very rewarding. I love my job. I love the problem solving. I love the learning. I love the people I work with. But it's not the only path that you can take, either from the undergrad that you go to get to vet school, or even if you go through vet school, there's lots of choices. And I think when I was your age, I didn't really understand how much you could do with these and how much the choice was really under your own control. And that's a really important one to know.
Thank you so much, Dr. Caitlin. I'm truly grateful for everything that you showed me here and all this exciting new equipment.
You're very welcome. I'm really glad we could spend the time together, and we're excited to see you at the window.
That was amazing. I got to ask so many questions and learn so much. And if you have any questions, remember to put them in the Q&A section and we will get them answered.
Well, that was fun to watch. Thanks so much for touring Gabby around. I know she really enjoyed it. And that vet clinic is super nice to have. I remember when it first opened, y'all were doing an exam on one of the birds. So it's really cool just to be able to walk by and see what's going on in real time.
It has made a huge difference to what we do and how we do it.
And I'm assuming you're enjoying having that space.
Yes, very much so. And amazingly, we haven't yet come up with anything that we designed stupidly. So that's good.
What are kind of like the biggest perks of having that space?
The biggest one in terms of animal care is that we can pivot if something changes, which with the tiny space we had before, we couldn't do. So if we were in the middle of exam and it was clear this animal needed x-rays, that was a process. We had to get people out of the room, we had to get equipment, we had to move everything else. And then that impacted how we managed those animals. So now we have the space to be able to do that. And I think the biggest one for me is that now we have the space for people to be around while we do stuff. Whereas before, genuinely having more than 2 people in that small room we had before doing anything was virtually impossible. And so now we can have other staff in there, we can show them what we can do, we can train them on it, is really invaluable.
Right. And before it was just basically a small little closet, right? With kind of the minimal equipment that you needed.
Yeah, and we had good equipment. It just wasn't enough space. It was really, we have other stuff in there now, but it was really the space.
Right. The animals definitely still got good care, even without the fancy clinic, but it's a lot easier to provide their care now.
Yep.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier about the expansion of the aquarium and the ocean pavilion. From your perspective as a vet, can you talk about kind of what it takes to open a large new exhibit?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with saying that I like the way that we are developing this new exhibit. In that the focus has been on animal health and wellness. And so the husbandry teams who take care of the animals, and then myself, have been involved right from the beginning in terms of what we need to meet the goals that we have to be able to produce this experience for everyone and to be able to engage the community in it. And so I would say that that is unfortunately not that common. And so that's very nice. So my role in terms of the new building has been around designing all the animal spaces, planning what species we think will do really well, rather than, hey, this species is cool, we're going to see if it works. We don't want to do that. We want to get species that we think has a very good chance they're going to thrive. And then we sort of past that point now with the design. So now my role right now is reviewing those species plans and then setting up to start acquiring the animals, which is a lot of work, which I think if you're not in animal care, you have no idea how much work it takes to get an animal and transport an animal from all the different institutions and all the places these are coming in from. And then there's going to be getting them used to our spaces and our animal care and getting them, making sure that they're healthy. And then there's going to be moving them into the new building after we've made sure that that one's ready to go. And so we are a little over a year and 2 years out. 2 years out. And we are very deeply involved in that process already, which is great.
Yeah, it is. And there was a question that it's like they knew you were going to be talking about this because they want to know how the sharks and the bigger fish are transported to the aquarium.
Yep. So actually, I was just approving something today on that. So fish are always transported in water, and that might sound really obvious, but some things don't need to be. Corals actually often are not transported in water. There's some other things like that. But anyway, fish are always transported in water. And because they're so dependent on the quality and the type of water that they're in, all of their transport considerations go into maintaining their environment. And that includes preparing them for the shipping and then making sure that as we go through the shipping, we're maintaining their environment exactly where they want it. And so the simplest answer is yes, it looks like they're transported in, we put them in very large tanks and we transport them that way. And it looks very straightforward, but there's an awful lot more that goes into that to maintaining their conditions all the way through. Because what we don't want to do at all is compromise their health just to get them from one place to the other. That's not the plan.
Right. As we're kind of getting to the end of our evening tonight, we definitely still have time for some questions. But I just want to veer off a little bit and talk about kind of what takeaways and advice you have for people who are maybe hoping to get into, the veterinary field, especially at a zoo or aquarium.
Sure. I scribbled some things on this question, so I figured it was going to come up. But I actually want to start with more general things, is that I've just sort of, this has all sounded really fun, I think. But anytime you're talking to anyone about their career and their job choice and everything else, I think it's really important to talk to them about what the negatives are, what the frustrations are, what they'd like to change if they would. And there isn't a job, there is a career out there that people don't have things, you know what, I'd like to change that. And so for our veterinary profession in particular, I think in small animal practice, a dog and cat, really a little bit more than zoo and aquarium, for all of them, really, we obviously really want to work on our equity and inclusion in those industries, but we also really need to work on supporting mental health better than we have done historically. This job, like I said in the video, this can be hard. And there are people who go into it thinking, hey, I'm going to be saving animals all the time. And that's not what my job is. A lot of the times, there are times that happens and it's great, but that is not the core of my job. And I would say people go into this and they end up in situations that can be hard, that can be difficult. And I don't want to paint this incredibly rosy picture of veterinary medicine because those things come up and it's an important thing to know about. But that's my first sort of, that's my negative. Do you want me to jump into other more positive bits of advice?
Yeah, definitely. No, and that's
Okay.
a good point, because not every job, of course, you want to tell all the good parts about it, but nothing is a 100% perfect all the time. So it's important to talk about kind of the expectations in all areas of the career.
Yeah, and actually that leads really nicely into my big advice, which is to explore. You are your best advocate. You know what engages you. You know what's not engaging you, and the best way to find that out is to explore as much as you can. And it might seem, depending on your situation, that other people have more opportunities than you, but I do think if you can work at it, you can create opportunities anywhere. And that's actually how I first got into this, and it was a long time ago before there was quite so many internet options. So literally, like, I started off just cold calling people and being like, I'm in the area, I'm interested in this stuff, can I help you? And that's really what got me a lot of my opportunities. And it was really valuable to me because originally I was thinking about different things. I was interested in all sorts of stuff. I didn't understand people who were interested in one thing. But by exploring different things and trying different jobs all the way through, I learned more about myself and what I wanted and what real job expectations would be like. And I think that helped me get to where I am now. So exploring things, I think, is really, really really important. And then the other one I would say is, I think it came up in the video, but I also wouldn't get so fixed on what I think things should be, because that is just a guarantee of frustration pretty much. And you know what, some people are going to get very lucky and they're going to get the perfect path and it might drive you up the wall. Most people don't do that. Most people hopefully if they're lucky, find something that they find engaging and interesting, and they might change their mind. Some of the most interesting people I know have changed their careers several times, and that's all okay. And so don't feel like just because maybe you don't know exactly what you want to do, or you do know exactly what you want to do, that might change in 5 years' time. It might change in 10 years' time, and that's all okay.
So there was a question that just popped up. How do we introduce young people to a career like yours when they may not be near a large body of water?
It's a good question as well. And it goes into some really deep stuff that we're digging into, and the vet schools and everyone should be digging into. And I think the aquarium is doing a really good job trying to reach out to folks and give them opportunities. I would say one of the magical things now about the internet is that you can do a lot of exploring without necessarily being on the coast to start with, if you're looking at aquatics. And again, if you're like, you know what, I want to do aquatics and I live in, I'll pick a middle one, Ohio. I am willing to bet there is still a lot of pond aquaculture going on. I am willing to bet there is a lot of university work on aquatic ecosystems even there, and river systems and everything else. There's a way to develop these skills where you are. And if you're able to devote that time to looking at other opportunities and you are able to travel, that can open up others as well. So there is a lot out there. It takes work to find those opportunities. I don't want people to expect the stuff to be given to them. I think that's an unrealistic expectation. But I think if you're able to and willing to put in that, and you're like, I'm really engaged in this, I'm really interested in ratfish, some of the coolest fish out there. You could online, you can look up researchers looking at ratfish, and you could email them and be like, you know what, ratfish, they're the coolest things ever. I live in Kansas. I'd love to do something with ratfish. I've got a computer. Can I do anything to help you out? And you know what? A lot of times you won't get the reply, and it's not meant badly. But you know what? Sometimes you're going to find someone who's like, yeah, I do kind of have this data project that needs to get worked on. Can you help me put that together? And so those opportunities come about, but they do take some work to find.
Definitely. So if you kind of mentioned being a vet isn't always what people expect it to be, right? It's not always just caring for the animal, taking care of the animal. But if someone wanted to, take care of an animal and being a vet isn't quite what they're looking for, maybe, what other type of animal care jobs are available at a place like the Seattle Aquarium?
Yep. So most of our animal care is done, that you might hear different terms, but in our case, they're animal care specialists or technicians. You might hear husbandry staff, you might hear aquarists or biologists. And those are the teams that do most of the day-to-day animal work. They do most of the training. And then we also have veterinary technicians that work with staff, but we're also supported by enormous teams of people who might not be in there with the animals, but are still doing just as important job. So we've got engineers who are maintaining our habitats. We've got staff who are doing an amazing job interpreting our habitats and really bringing them to the people who are visiting. So there's a lot, there's so many jobs here that are all key to animal care, but people don't think about them because they think about the vet job or the person feeding the seal.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I really like the message of kind of, don't stress if you don't have it figured out right away, right? Keep trying different things, find that field that's right for you. I think we're going to have time for a few more minutes of final Q&A. We have some lingering questions, if it's okay if I ask those. Great. So one of them, do you use any virtual reality in training?
That's a really good question. The vet schools are starting to do that, partly to try and reduce the burden on animals in training. And then there's some other really interesting work going on using a form of virtual reality. This is going to be hard to explain. When large whales beach, they're using scanning software to create images that you can explore them with virtual reality. And it's called a virtual autopsy, effectively. And it's a really interesting piece of technology. And that's sort of one of the areas that I see. I personally, my experience with VR consists of my cousin's basement. He's got a VR system, and that's about it. Sorry.
No, that's interesting to hear about. The virtual kind of necropsy, maybe not the video games, but those are fun too. So how does the medical team, yourself included at the aquarium, monitor the health of all the different animals?
We rely on lots of eyes and lots of communication. So we have lots of binders and things like that keep track so that we don't let anything drop through the cracks. But we talk all the time. And so we talk as teams and we talk as individuals to make sure that all the animals are thriving and living the best lives that they can. And so that's really the short answer to how we do it. The day-to-day of how we do it is more of those discussions, prioritizing, figuring out the best goals and how we can get there and support animal care. But really, it's all around that team approach. This is not a job for a solo person. You'd never be able to do it.
Right. And then someone wants to know, with limited experience in the field, what do you think is the best way to gain that experience?
That's a really good question. And it sort of ties into one that I've always found interesting. So we've hired, in my career, I've hired a lot of people from vet students on up to every level, basically. And I have, over time, developed what skills I think help people in this industry and what skills I'm not particularly fussed about. And it's been interesting over time seeing other people hiring from the same pool and kind of how that differs. So this is very much sort of my opinion. It might not necessarily affect anyone else. But the things that I am looking for in terms of experience is there are people who come in with very flashy CVs and they've gone and done darting of megavertebrates in South Africa. That's lovely. But that's actually not really gonna, not just because it's megavertebrates, but that is not going to impact me. When I see a CV, what I want to see is that this person's shown drive to get into this industry. This isn't a like, oh wow, that sounds kind of cool, I'm just going to apply for that. So wherever they are, whatever their opportunities have been, they've been trying to work with that. And then the other thing that really matters to me is that training programs are an enormous investment for the people giving the training programs. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like cheap labor, I promise you, but it's a big investment. And so I want to hire trainees who are going to stay in the industry. So I don't want to hire someone who's like, nah, it's kind of fun, but you know what? It's interesting to me and I'm not, that's about it. I want someone who's like fish medicine. That engages me. I am interested in that. I've done my best to get experience. I want to get more experience with you. That's what grabs me. And then the other thing that matters to me far more than any skills, and this is talking about hiring qualified vets and things like that, because we've had people apply with, maybe they're the best person in the world to put an IV catheter in a dolphin. I was like, that's lovely. But what I want is someone who's going to integrate and work really well with a team and build a program that works for all the animals. The IV catheter in a dolphin, I can get someone in for that. So in terms of like building a program, that is what I am looking for. I am not necessarily looking for the world's best clinician. I'm looking for someone with a really good solid base who shows they can focus, who cares about the animals and wants to contribute to this field. That's what I'm looking for.
Wow, thank you so much. I think that was a kind of a nice place to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Dr. Caitlin, for being here tonight, for talking all about what you do, and for answering all those questions. And thank you all in attendance for asking such great questions. Again, thank you everybody for attending our Ocean Career Series tonight. You can expect to have another version of this coming up in the fall. We're going to stick to a couple more virtual programs for now. It is nice because it provides people who maybe are far away from the ocean an opportunity to hear about this stuff. So definitely expect an invitation for another event in the fall. And thank you so much for attending tonight. And thanks again, Dr. Caitlin, for spending your evening with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And thank you for the great questions.
Yeah, thank you everybody for the questions. And again, I hope we see you in the fall, and I hope we see you at the aquarium soon. Bye.